The Valorian Dominion had conquered 17 star systems in 3 years. Their weapons could destroy cities in minutes. Their warships could burn entire continents. Their soldiers stood 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor that was harder than steel. They had never lost a war. When their fleet arrived in Earth's solar system, High Commander Turan looked at the blue planet with bored eyes. He had conquered worlds with stronger militaries. He had defeated species with better technology. Earth, with its divided nations and primitive weapons, would be easy. His intelligence officers gave him reports about the planet. They told him about the cities, the military bases, the population centers. They also told him about the wilderness areas. Thick jungles covered millions of square kilometers. Swamps and rainforests and mountains filled with fog and rain. The humans apparently found these places difficult to survive in. Turan laughed when he heard this. His admirals laughed with him. "These humans struggle to live in their own forests," Turan said, shaking his head. "We have marched through the acid storms of Keth 7. We have conquered volcanic moons where the ground itself tried to kill us. Earth's little jungles will be nothing." The Valorians chose their landing zones carefully. They came down on major cities first. New York, London, Beijing, Seoul, Moscow. Their dropships fell from the sky like metal rain, and their soldiers poured out with weapons blazing. Earth's armies fought back. Tanks rolled through streets. Jets filled the sky. Soldiers died by the thousands defending their homes. But it was not enough. The Valorian weapons cut through human armor like paper. Their shields stopped bullets and missiles. Their orbital platforms destroyed any large military formation that tried to gather. Within 72 hours, most of Europe had fallen. Large parts of North America and Asia were under Valorian control. The aliens owned the sky completely. No human aircraft could fly without being shot down. The broadcasts of surrender began. One by one, governments fell. Leaders were captured or killed. The Valorians set up their command centers in the conquered cities and began counting their victory. But not everyone surrendered. Deep beneath the mountains of the Korean peninsula, in a bunker that no satellite could see, Colonel Park Do-in gathered what remained of the Republic's Special Warfare Command. The bunker was old, built decades ago for a war that never came. Now it held the last hope of humanity. Do-hyun was 53 years old. His hair was gray at the temples, and his face was lined with years of hard service. He had spent his entire adult life training for war. But not this kind of war. Not against enemies from the stars. He stood before a holographic map that showed the Valorian positions. Red markers covered the globe like a disease. Cities, ports, military bases, power plants. The aliens had taken everything important. Major Yoon Ji-yeon stood beside him. She was younger than Do-hyun, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that never seemed to rest. She commanded the 1st Special Forces Brigade's Jungle Warfare Division. Her soldiers were the best at fighting in wild terrain. They could survive for weeks in the deep forest with nothing but a knife and their training. "They've taken Seoul," Do-hyun said. His voice was tired but steady. "They've taken everything above ground. Our conventional forces are destroyed. The government has scattered. We are what's left." Ji-yeon studied the map carefully. Her eyes moved across the red markers, but she was not looking at where the Valorians were. She was looking at where they were not. "They've concentrated their forces in cities and plains," she said slowly. "Open terrain, urban areas, places their technology works best. Yes, they haven't touched the deep wilderness zones. The jungles, the mountains, the swamps." Do-hyun nodded. "Because they don't think they need to. They believe the war is already won." A small smile appeared on Ji-yeon's face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had spotted prey. Then we teach them otherwise, she said. Over the next few days, messages went out through channels the Valorians could not detect. Radio signals hidden in static. Physical messengers traveling through tunnels and forest paths. Coded messages left in dead drops across 3 continents. The message was simple. Do not surrender. Fall back. Go to ground. Wait for instructions. Thousands of soldiers heard the call. Special forces units from a dozen countries. Rangers, Green Berets, Spetsnaz, SAS, commandos from every nation that had trained men and women to fight in the wild places of the world. They abandoned their bases and their cities. They took what weapons they could carry and disappeared into the jungles, the mountains, the swamps. The Valorians noticed, of course. Their sensors detected the movement, but they did not understand what they were seeing. To them, it looked like cowardice. Defeated soldiers running away to hide. High Commander Tehran received reports of humans fleeing into the wilderness and dismissed them with a wave of his armored hand. Let them run, he told his officers. Let them hide in their forests and eat insects. When we are ready, we will go in and collect them. They pose no threat. His officers agreed. They had seen the human military. Brave, yes, but hopelessly outmatched. What could scattered survivors do against the might of the Valorian dominion? In her command center deep beneath the mountains, Major Yoonjeon received reports of her own. Soldiers arriving at hidden camps. Weapons caches being opened. Supply lines being established through terrain no Valorian scanner could penetrate. She spread a paper map across her table. Paper, because paper could not be hacked or detected. She marked positions with a pencil. Human positions. Valorian positions. Terrain features. Water sources. Choke points. Colonel Do-yoon watched her work. How long until we're ready? 2 weeks for initial operations. A month for full strength. And then? Jeon looked up from her map. Her eyes were cold and certain. And then we show them why humans have always feared the jungle. Why our ancestors told stories about monsters in the forest. Why even now, with all our technology, there are places on this planet where nature still rules. She placed her finger on a patch of green deep in the mountains of Southeast Asia. They think they've conquered Earth, she said. They've conquered our cities, our roads, our open spaces. But the wild places? The dark places? She shook her head. Those belong to us. Those have always belonged to us. And anyone who enters without permission does not come out again. Outside the bunker, far above, the stars wheeled in the night sky. Valorian warships patrolled in orbit, confident in their victory. They had no idea what was coming. Galactic armies mocked Earth's wilds, until they faced the Jungle Special Forces Part 2. Into the Green Hell, the Valorians called it a cleaning operation. 3,000 soldiers would go into the jungle mountains of Southeast Asia and eliminate the human resistance hiding there. Simple work. Their commanders expected it to take 2 days at most. Captain Baek Sung-ho watched them come. He was 70 feet above the ground, hidden in the branches of an ancient tree. The canopy around him was so thick that sunlight barely reached the forest floor. He had been in position for 6 days. His team of 12 soldiers had not moved, had not made a sound, had not been detected by any Valorian scanner. They had eaten insects and plants. They had collected rainwater in leaves. They had slept in shifts, tied to branches so they would not fall. This was what they had trained for. This was what they were born to do. Below, the Valorian column moved through the jungle in tight formation. Their armor gleamed in the patches of light that broke through the canopy. Their weapons hummed with energy. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who had never known defeat. Sun-ho counted them through his scope. 3,000, just as intelligence had reported. Heavy weapons. powered armor, communications equipment, everything a modern army needed. None of it would help them here. He touched his radio twice. A signal to his team. Get ready. The jungle had been prepared for weeks. What looked like vines were actually tripwires connected to explosive devices. What looked like fallen logs hid pit traps lined with sharpened stakes dipped in poison. The humid air carried tiny spores that would slowly eat through the seals of Valorian armor. Human soldiers had spent weeks preparing this killing ground, and the Valorians had walked right into it. The first Valorian died without making a sound. Sergeant Can Myra appeared behind him like a ghost. One moment there was nothing. The next moment, her blade was sliding through the gap between his helmet and his collar. The Valorian fell, and Myra was already gone, melting back into the undergrowth before the body hit the ground. She had trained for 11 years in the art of silent killing. She could move through dense forest without breaking a single twig. She could hold her breath for 4 minutes. She could kill a man in complete darkness, using only touch and sound. The Valorians did not even know she existed. The second and third Valorians died moments later. They triggered a tripwire that was not connected to explosives. Instead, it released a bent tree trunk that whipped across the trail like a giant's arm. The impact crushed their armor and sent their bodies flying. The fourth Valorian stepped on what looked like solid ground. It was not. The earth opened beneath him, and he fell into a flooded tunnel that dragged him down into darkness. His screams lasted only seconds before the water silenced him. Now the Valorians knew something was wrong. Their commander shouted orders. Soldiers raised weapons, looking for targets. But there was nothing to see. Only trees. Only shadows. Only the thick green walls of the jungle pressing in from all sides. They opened fire. Plasma bolts tore through the forest. Trees exploded into splinters. Fires started in the undergrowth. The Valorians shot at everything that moved, everything that might move, everything that looked like it could possibly hide an enemy. But the jungle was too wet, too dense, too alive. The fires died as quickly as they started. And the human soldiers were not where the Valorians were shooting. They were above. They were below. They were everywhere and nowhere. The attacks continued. A Valorian sergeant turned to give orders and found a knife buried in his throat. A squad leader stepped away from his unit to check his scanner and simply disappeared, pulled into the undergrowth by hands he never saw. A heavy weapons team set up their plasma cannon and died when the ground beneath them collapsed into a pit filled with sharpened bamboo. Every attack came from a different direction. Every attack was silent and fast and deadly. The Valorians could not form a defensive line because they did not know where the enemy was. They could not call for support because their communications were being jammed by devices hidden throughout the canopy. By nightfall, 3,000 had become 2,000. The darkness made everything worse. The Valorians had night vision, but it was designed for open terrain, not thick jungle. The heat signatures of the trees confused their sensors. The sounds of the forest, the insects and animals and dripping water, masked the sound of approaching death. They tried to make camp. They set up perimeter defenses. They posted guards every 10 meters. It did not matter. Soldiers still died. Guards vanished from their posts. Officers were killed in their tents. By dawn, 2,000 had become 1,500. The Valorian commander finally gave the order to retreat. His soldiers had not slept. They had not eaten. They had spent the night shooting at shadows and watching their friends die. They were tired and scared and desperate to escape this green hell. But retreat was not so easy. The jungle had closed behind them. The trail they had followed was gone, overgrown in a single night. Human soldiers had moved through the darkness, cutting new paths that led nowhere, blocking old paths with fallen trees and hidden traps. The Valorians were lost. Captain, Big Sunho watched them stumble through the forest, trying to find their way out. He did not attack. Not yet. Fear was a weapon too, and right now the Valorians were learning to fear. He sent a report to Major Yoon-jian through a messenger drone, a small device that flew through the canopy like a bird. The message was brief. First contact successful. Enemy demoralized. Continuing operations. 3 days later, what remained of the Valorian force finally found their way out of the jungle. Of the 3,000 who had entered, fewer than 800 survived. They had not killed a single human soldier. They had not even seen a human soldier. They had only seen death coming from the shadows. Silent and unstoppable. High Commander Turan received the report in his command center in what had once been Seoul. He read it 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. "This is impossible," he said. 3,000 soldiers. Gone. To what? Trees and insects? His intelligence chief had no answer. In the jungle, Major Yoon-jian received her own reports. 800 survivors meant over 2,000 Valorians dead. 2,000 enemy soldiers, killed by 12 human operators and the jungle itself. She allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Then she began planning the next operation. "They're learning fear," she told Colonel Do-yoon when she spoke with him that night. "That's the first step. And the second step?" Ji-yoon looked at the map, at the green spaces where humans still ruled. "We make them understand that fear is wisdom. We make them understand that some places on this planet will never belong to them. And we make them pay in blood for every step they take into our territory." She marked another location on the map. Another killing ground. Another trap. The war was just beginning. Galactic Armies mocked Earth's wilds, until they faced Jungle Special Forces Part 3. The hunter becomes the hunted. High Commander Turan stood in his war room, staring at the casualty reports. The numbers did not make sense to him. They could not make sense to him. The Valorian Dominion had conquered species that could bend space and time. They had defeated enemies with weapons that could destroy stars. How were primitive humans, hiding in forests with knives and traps, killing so many of his soldiers? In 2 weeks of jungle operations, Turan had lost more troops than in the entire conquest of the Parthian cluster. More than in the war against the machine intelligences of Sector 9. More than in any campaign in Valorian history. "Explain this to me," he demanded, turning to his intelligence chief. "We have ships in orbit. We have technology they cannot match. We have numbers. How are they doing this?" The intelligence chief was a smaller Valorian, bred for thinking rather than fighting. He spoke carefully, knowing that Turan's anger could turn deadly at any moment. "The terrain, High Commander. Our sensors cannot see through the forest canopy. Our armor is being damaged by biological agents we have never encountered. Our formations are being taken apart piece by enemies we cannot find." "Then burn the forests," Turan said. "Use orbital weapons. Turn their hiding places to ash." "We have tried, Commander. The humans have hidden anti-orbital weapons throughout the jungle zones. Every bombardment cost us ships. And they are using the wreckage of our destroyed vessels to build more weapons." Turan was silent for a long moment. Then he made a decision. Send 50,000 soldiers into the wilderness. Heavy armor. Air support. Every weapon we have. I want those jungles empty of human life. The intelligence chief hesitated. "Commander, the losses we have already suffered suggest that I do not care about losses." Turan's voice echoed through the war room. "I care about victory. We are the Valorian Dominion. We do not lose to animals hiding in trees." The orders went out. 50,000 Valorian soldiers prepared to enter the jungle. Lieutenant O. Tayson heard the dropships before he saw them. He was on a ridge overlooking a valley where the Valorians planned to build their forward base. Beside him lay Corporal Shin Yoonji, his spotter, already calculating distances and wind speeds. They watched the ships come down. Hundreds of them. Thousands of soldiers pouring out, setting up equipment, building defenses. It was the largest Valorian deployment since the initial invasion. That's a lot of them, Yoonji said quietly. Tayson adjusted his rifle. It was a modified weapon, redesigned by human engineers to punch through Valorian armor at 800 meters. He had 40 rounds. Each one would count. Doesn't matter how many there are, he replied. They still need to drink water. They still need to sleep. They still need to make camp somewhere. And we control the somewhere. The Valorians built their base quickly and efficiently. Perimeter walls, sensor towers, patrol routes, supply depots. Everything was done by the book, exactly as their training dictated. The humans did not attack the base. Instead, they attacked everything around it. Water sources were poisoned first. Human soldiers had spent weeks finding every stream, every spring, every pool within 20 kilometers of the Valorian position. They added compounds that Valorian sensors could not detect, chemicals that would not show until soldiers started dying 3 days later. Supply convoys were hit next. The roads through the jungle were narrow and winding, impossible to defend. Human teams waited in ambush positions, striking fast and disappearing before air support could arrive. They did not try to destroy the convoys entirely. They just took enough to hurt, killed enough to frighten, and vanished back into the green dot. Then came the assassinations. Sergeant First Class Cho Yuna had grown up in the mountains. She could move through thick forest as easily as most people walk down a street. She could climb any tree, cross any river, survive in any terrain. And she could kill without making a sound. She studied the Valorian base for 3 days before making her first move. She watched their patrol patterns. She noted the gaps in their sensor coverage. She found the small spaces between their defenses where a human could slip through. On the third night, she went in. The Valorians had designed their camp to stop armies. Walls and weapons and thousands of soldiers on guard. But Yuna was not an army. She was a single shadow, moving through darkness like water flowing through cracks. She found the logistics officer in his tent, reviewing supply reports. He was still looking at his screen when her blade opened his throat. She was gone before his body fell, slipping back into the shadows, leaving no trace. On the 5th night, she took the communications officer. On the 7th night, she walked into the command tent where the division general slept. His bodyguards were outside. His sensors showed nothing. He never woke up. The next morning, the Valorians found their general dead. They found footprints leading away from the tent, toward the edge of the camp. The footprints went to where the jungle began. And then they just stopped. As if the forest had swallowed her whole. Fear spread through the Valorian camp like a disease. Soldiers who had conquered worlds now jumped at shadows. Officers refused to sleep alone. Guards fired at every noise in the night. And still the attacks continued. Patrols went out and did not come back. Scouts vanished without a trace. Supply depots burned in the night, set ablaze by enemies no one ever saw. The 50,000 soldiers became 40,000, then 30,000, then 20,000. In her underground command center, Major Yoon Ji-eun tracked every operation, every casualty, every small victory. The Valorians were being bled dry, and they did not know how to stop it. Colonel Park Do-yoon joined her one evening. Looking at the map that showed Valorian positions shrinking day by day. "They're calling you a ghost," he said. "The Ghost Colonel. The Valorian soldiers tell stories about you. They say you can walk through walls. They say you can kill with a thought." Jian almost smiled. "Good. Fear is a weapon. The more they fear us, the less they can fight. How much longer? Longer than we'd like. They still have orbital supremacy. They still control the cities. We can bleed them in the jungle, but we cannot win the war this way. She pointed to a location on the map. We need something bigger. Something that will break them completely. What are you thinking? Ji-yoon was quiet for a moment. Then she began to explain. They've built a central command hub here, in what used to be Thailand. Their remaining senior leadership is there. Heavy defenses. Tens of thousands of soldiers. It's the heart of their ground operation. Attacking that would be suicide. Attacking it directly would be suicide, Ji-yeon agreed. But we're not going to attack it directly. We're going to let the planet attack it for us. She pointed to the rivers that surrounded the Valorian position. 3 rivers, all flowing toward the same valley. Monsoon season is coming, and we've been preparing. Do-hyun understood. His eyes widened. The dams. The dams, Ji-yeon confirmed. 3 months of work. Thousands of soldiers moving materials by hand, hidden under the canopy. When we release the water, their base will flood. And when they evacuate, they'll have to go through the jungle. She looked at Do-hyun with cold, certain eyes. Through us. The Valorian High Council met for the first time in 300 years. They gathered in their great chamber aboard the flagship in Earth's orbit, surrounded by stars and the blue glow of the conquered planet below. These were the most powerful beings in 17 star systems. They had never known defeat. Now they were afraid. The Minister of War presented the casualty reports. His voice was hollow, empty of the usual pride that came with Valorian military briefings. We have lost 47,000 troops in ground operations. Not to battles, not to armies, to the planet itself. Our soldiers enter the wilderness and do not return. Our officers are killed in their own tents. Our supply lines are cut faster than we can repair them. The council members shifted uneasily. 47,000 soldiers. More than most wars in Valorian history. Then we destroy the wilderness entirely, one council member suggested. Orbital bombardment. Burn everything green on this planet to ash. The minister shook his head. We have tried. The humans have established anti-orbital positions throughout the jungle zones. Hidden. Camouflaged. Every time we fire from orbit, they shoot back. Every bombardment costs us ships. He paused. They are building new weapons from the wreckage of our destroyed vessels. They are using our own technology against us. Silence fell over the chamber. How is this possible? The council leader spoke for the first time, his ancient voice heavy with disbelief. We have conquered species that could tear holes in reality. We have defeated machine armies that numbered in the trillions. How are we losing to primitives on a single planet? No one had an answer. On Earth, far below the orbiting flagship, the human resistance had grown into something new. Colonel Park Do-hyun now commanded a network that covered 3 continents. Thousands of special operators worked in small teams, communicating through methods the Valorians could not intercept. Messenger animals carried coded information through the forest. Arrangements of stones and plants spelled out orders for those who knew how to read them. Drums beat in patterns that sounded like natural noise, but carried complex instructions. Smoke signals rose from hidden positions, visible only to watchers who knew where to look. The Valorians had technology. The humans had the planet. Major Yoon Ji-yeon had become a legend. The Valorian soldiers called her the Ghost Colonel, though they did not know her name or her rank. They only knew that wherever their forces went into the jungle, she was there. Where she walked, Valorians died. Now she was planning her greatest operation. Operation Monsoon. She gathered her team leaders in a hidden cave deep in the mountains. Captain Baek Sin-ho was there, along with Lieutenant Oh Tae-sun and Sergeant Kang Mira, Staff Sergeant MGA led the scout element. Master Sergeant Wang Suman, the oldest soldier in the room, represented the veterans who had been fighting since the first days of the invasion. Jian activated a holographic map showing the main Valorian command hub. It sat in a valley in what had once been Thailand, surrounded by walls and weapons and tens of thousands of soldiers. "This is their heart," she said. "Their remaining senior leadership is here. Their central communications. Their strategic planning. If we destroy this, their ground operations collapse." Ji leaned forward to study the defenses. "That's heavy protection. Direct assault would cost us everything we have. We're not assaulting directly." Jian pointed to the 3 rivers that curved around the Valorian position. "We're using these." She explained the plan. For 3 months, human engineers had been working upstream. They had built dams using trees and stone and mud, working under the canopy where no satellite could see them. Thousands of soldiers had carried materials by hand, moving at night, leaving no trace. When the monsoon rains came, the dams would hold back billions of liters of water. And when Jion gave the order, those dams would break. "The base will flood within hours," she continued. "Not enough to destroy it completely. They'll have time to evacuate. But they'll have to evacuate into the jungle. Into terrain we control." Master Sergeant Wang spoke up. "We're talking about engaging their entire remaining ground force. That's 30,000 soldiers." Jian nodded. 30,000 scared, disorganized soldiers, fleeing a disaster in terrain they don't understand. Their communications will be jammed by equipment we've already placed. Their air support will be grounded by the storm. They won't be an army anymore. They'll be prey. She looked around the room, meeting each soldier's eyes. "This is not a battle. This is a hunt." The preparations took another month. Human teams moved into position throughout the jungle surrounding the Valorian base. They set up ambush points. They prepared traps. They studied the terrain until they knew every tree, every stream, every shadow. Sergeant First Class Cho Yuna led a team of infiltrators who would move ahead of the fleeing Valorians, blocking escape routes and creating confusion. Lieutenant Otason and Corporal Shin Yunji set up sniper positions on the ridges, where they could see the valley below. Captain Beek Sanho positioned his team in the canopy, ready to drop on the enemy from above. Sergeant Kanmira waited in the darkness with her blade, patient as death itself. Jian coordinated everything from a mobile command post that moved through the jungle like a ghost. She tracked weather patterns, Valorian movements, and the readiness of her own forces. Every detail had to be perfect. They would only get one chance. The monsoon clouds began to gather 3 weeks later. Dark masses piled up on the horizon, heavy with rain. The air grew thick and humid. Animals in the jungle sensed what was coming and sought shelter. The Valorians noticed the weather change too. Their meteorological satellites predicted heavy rain, nothing unusual for the region. They reinforced their drainage systems and continued their operations. They did not know that human hackers had been feeding false data to their weather satellites for weeks. The storm that was coming was not just heavy rain. It was the worst storm the region had seen in a century. Colonel Do-hyun contacted Jion on the night before the operation. "Everything is ready?" "Everything is ready." "Casualties?" Jion was honest. "There will be many. This is not a small operation. We will lose people. Can we win?" She looked out at the jungle, dark and alive and waiting. The rain was beginning to fall. "We will win," she said. "Because we have to. Because this is our planet. Because they came here thinking we were weak, thinking our wilderness was just empty space to be conquered. They were wrong." The rain grew heavier. Thunder rolled across the mountains. "They came to hunt us," Jian said. "Tonight we hunt them." She gave the signal. Miles upstream, thousands of soldiers began breaking the dams. The water began to rise. The floods came at midnight. High. Commander Turan was in the command center when the first alarms went off. Water was rising. The perimeter sensors were going underwater one by one. Something was wrong with the rivers. He tried to contact the orbital platform for satellite images, but the storm was too heavy. He tried to reach the weather satellites, but they showed nothing unusual. For 5 critical minutes, Turan did not understand what was happening. Then the walls broke. Billions of liters of water poured into the valley. The flood swept away defensive positions, destroyed communication towers, and turned the Valorian base into a lake of mud and debris. Soldiers scrambled for high ground, abandoning their weapons and equipment. Turan shouted orders, trying to organize an evacuation. His voice was lost in the chaos. The power went out. The backup generators failed. The communications array went silent. In the darkness, with rain hammering down and water rising around him, Turan heard something he had never heard before in his centuries of conquest. His soldiers were screaming. Outside the ruined base, the Valorian army fled into the jungle. 30,000 soldiers running in complete disorder. Units separated in the darkness and rain. Officers lost contact with their troops. The carefully organized formations that had conquered 17 star systems fell apart in minutes. They ran without direction, without communication, without hope. They just ran, desperate to escape the water, desperate to find safety. They did not know they were running into a trap. The humans were waiting. Captain Beek Sunho moved through the chaos with his team, silent as shadows. They did not engage large groups. They picked off the ones who fell behind, the wounded, the lost, the officers who had become separated from their guards. Every kill was quiet. Every body was left where other Valorians would find it. Each dead soldier was a message. You are not safe here. You will never be safe here. Sergeant Kang Mira was everywhere and nowhere. Her blade found gaps in Valorian armor with mechanical precision. She appeared out of the rain, killed, and vanished before her victims could even cry out. By dawn, she had killed over 70 enemy soldiers. None of them had seen her face. Lieutenant O. Tayson and Corporal Shin Yunji worked from the ridgeline, their rifle cracking through the storm. Each shot dropped a Valorian officer. Without leadership, the alien soldiers had no one to give orders, no one to tell them where to go. They wandered through the jungle like lost animals. Sergeant First Class Cho Yuna led her infiltration teams ahead of the main Valorian retreat, blocking escape routes with fallen trees and hidden traps. Every path led deeper into the jungle. Every clearing was an ambush point. Every shadow hid Death Dot, and Major Yoon Ji-yeon coordinated everything. She moved from position to position through the storm, directing her forces with hand signals and whispered commands. She appeared and disappeared like the ghost the Valorians believed her to be. Her soldiers saw her everywhere. A dark figure in the rain, always calm, always certain. Always one step ahead. The slaughter lasted until dawn, when the sun finally rose. Weak and pale through the departing storm clouds, the jungle was silent. 30,000 Valorian soldiers had fled into the wilderness. Fewer than 3,000 found their way out. The rest lay scattered through the jungle, their bodies already being reclaimed by the forest. High Commander Turan was found by Cho Yuna in a cave where he had taken shelter with his last bodyguards. He had lost his weapons. His armor was cracked and covered in mud. He no longer looked like the conqueror of worlds. He looked like a scared animal hiding from predators. Yuna killed the bodyguards quickly. Turan she kept alive. They needed him for the broadcast. Major Yoon Ji-yeon recorded the message herself. Turan stood beside her, his hands bowed, his head bowed. Behind them, The jungle stretched endlessly, green and alive and full of hidden death. "This is a message to all Valorian forces in the Sol system," Jian said, her voice calm and cold. "Your ground commander is in human custody. Your army is destroyed. You have lost." She let the words sink in. "You have 72 hours to begin evacuation. Any Valorian soldier remaining on Earth after that time will be hunted down and killed. Any Valorian ship that does not leave Earth's orbit will be destroyed." She paused. "You came to our planet thinking we were weak. You looked at our cities and our technology, and you thought you knew us. But you did not know us. You did not know the places where we came from. The wild places where humanity learned to survive, learned to hunt, learned to kill." Jian gestured at the jungle behind her. "These forests, these swamps, these mountains, they have been ours for 100,000 years. They remember when we were prey, and they remember when we became predators. They are part of us, and we are part of them." She looked directly into the camera. "You can conquer our cities. You can burn our fields. You can destroy our monuments. But if you follow us into the wild places of Earth, you will die. You will die alone, in the dark, and the forest will swallow you whole." The broadcast was sent to every Valorian ship in orbit, every Valorian base on the surface, every Valorian communication channel. The evacuation began within hours. It took 3 days for the Valorian fleet to leave Earth's orbit. They took their wounded. They took their equipment. They left behind the bodies of nearly 50,000 soldiers, buried in jungles and swamps and mountains across the planet. On the 4th day, Colonel Park Do-Yun stood at the edge of the jungle where the war had been won. The sky was clear. The Valorian ships were gone. For the first time in months, there were no enemies in orbit. Major Yoon Jian stood beside him. Her uniform was still stained with mud. Her face was tired but calm. "They'll be back," Do-Hyun said quietly. "Or others like them. The galaxy knows about Earth now. Other species will come, probably." Jian watched the sky where the ships had disappeared. "But now they know. Now the whole galaxy knows." "Knows what?" Jian turned to look at the jungle behind them. The trees stood tall and ancient, their branches heavy with leaves, their shadows hiding 1,000 secrets. Birds sang in the canopy. Insects hummed in the undergrowth. The forest was alive, patient, eternal. "They know that Earth is not just cities and farms and roads," she said. "They know that this planet has teeth. They know that humans are not just the soft creatures living in comfortable buildings. We are also the hunters in the forest, the shadows in the swamp, the predators that have been sharpening our skills for 100,000 years." She smiled, a sharp and dangerous expression. "They know that you can defeat our armies. You can capture our capitals. You can think you have won. But when you follow us into the wild places, into the jungles and mountains where humanity was born, you become prey." She placed her hand on the trunk of an ancient tree, feeling the rough bark against her palm. "And prey does not survive." The jungle rustled in the morning breeze. Somewhere deep in its shadows, a bird began to sing. Life continued. The forest endured, and Earth remained free. Far across the galaxy, in war rooms and council chambers, military commanders studied the reports from Earth. They learned about the jungle war. They learned about the ghost colonel. They learned about 50,000 soldiers who had vanished into the green. They made a note in their records. Earth, not worth the cost. Humans, dangerous on their home ground. The wild places of Earth had proven what the humans had always known. Some territories cannot be conquered. Some prey bites back, and some planets are more than they appear.